Namaskar. I'm Dr. Shubhra Sinha, your course instructor for Stress Management course. And I welcome you all in the second module of this course, which will be focused on various types of stressors found in our recent and remote environment. But before that, we have to learn how these stressors trigger a stress response in our body. That is, the physiological mechanism which makes us feel aroused when we are confronted with some kind of stressor. And this is the talk of today's lecture also. So let's begin and see how our physiology works when we perceive a stressor or a threat in front of us. So today we are going to talk about the sympathetic adrenal medulla route of stimulating the body cells and feeling arousal. We will also discuss the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal route, again causing us feel stressed and aroused. These are the two routes we are going to discuss today. These routes respond to different kind of stressful situations. Whenever we are faced with acute stress, that means the stressor comes in suddenly and that too in a huge amount, the first route is activated. That is, the sympathetic nervous system responds to mediate the situation. Now what happens that this is a fast route. And whenever we have moderate level stressors which continues for a long time, leading to chronic stress, our body responds with the help of the second route, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal route. So this is comparatively a slower route, but this keeps on responding for a prolonged period of time if the stressor is not completely resolved. Let us discuss about the first route in detail. You can find the flow of event on screen. It starts with the perception of stress in presence of an environmental stimulus or anything which happens inside the body also. This triggers the activation of sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system in turn activates the adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla releases catecholamines, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine. And finally, these catecholamines have a generalized effect on our organ systems, leading to the stress response. This is a figure of sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system arises inside the vertebra and it passes to almost all organs of our body, right from the eyes till the genitalia. You can see the organs on the screen. I have given this figure here just to make you understand how pervasive the effect could be if the sympathetic nervous system gets activated for any reason. It is going to impact almost all our physiological systems. Okay? Now, what is the effect of sympathetic adrenal medulla system? If I try to elaborate a little bit more about this diagram, I should say that a sympathetic nervous system triggers adrenal medulla. Do you know what adrenal medulla is? There is an adrenal gland, which is an endocrine gland. It is situated just above the kidneys. That is why this is called adrenal. And this adrenal gland has two major areas. One is known as adrenal cortex and the second one is known as adrenal medulla. So this adrenal medulla basically releases two chemicals known as epinephrine and norepinephrine, and many times we collectively refer to them as catecholamines also, in response to the activation of sympathetic nervous system, which is a branch of autonomic nervous system that we have in our peripheral nervous system. All these details must be known to you if you are a psychology student or a biology student, or even if you are a vivid reader of these kind of contents. So, what happens when the sympathetic nervous system gets activated and it leads to the release of catecholamines? First of all, if I try to move from up to down in our body organs, you will find the pupil is dilated. Have you ever noticed that whenever we get afraid or stressed, our pupil dilates? This is an impact of the SAM route. Second thing, it checks the secretion of saliva. That is why you find your mouth getting dried whenever you feel stressed. It also innervates heart and causes an increased heart rate. Then it also causes bronchodilation. You know bronchioles which are present in our lungs? These bronchioles gets dilated so that we can consume more oxygen to fight with the situation. So the bronchioles are dilated, and at the same time the rate of respiration also increases. Then release of catecholamines leads to increased blood glucose levels. By diluting or by converting the stored glycogen and glucagon into glucose and bringing it back to the bloodstream. This glucose is then available for cells for metabolism and provides constant energy to our body. But at the same time, it means that whenever we get stressed, the level of glucose in our body is raised. So this is an alarm for diabetics. This is actually what happens in case of hyperglycemia. Whenever the patients of hyperglycemia, commonly known as diabetes, get stressed, the body starts converting the stored glycogen into glucose by raising the level of blood sugar. In addition to that, it also slows down the digestive process. Initially, I mentioned that it inhibits the secretion of saliva. You must be knowing that saliva contains salivary amylase, a very important enzyme to metabolize the carbohydrate component of our food. So, if saliva is not there, enzyme is also missing. Therefore, we cannot expect the carbohydrate component to get properly metabolized into mouth. If we move further, when it reaches the stomach and the small intestine, what happens? It also interrupts with the secretion of bile juices which are responsible for metabolism of food inside the stomach and intestine. Moreover, it reduces intestinal movements. So the whole process of digesting food is greatly hampered, leading to indigestion, diarrhea, and different kind of disorders related with the gastrointestinal tract. Why all this happens? Basically, it happens to converge the blood flow from the GI tract to the muscles, because whenever we have to act and respond to a situation of emergency, our limbs keep moving at a faster rate. The muscles which are responsible for this movement requires more of oxygen and glucose. And where do they get it from? They get it from the blood flow. So if the blood flow is not increased towards muscles, the muscles will not be able to perform at a higher speed and with the improved efficiency. That is why the blood flow towards the GI tract is reduced and converted to muscles. It also results in increased sodium retention. And what happens when the body retains sodium more than usual? Yes, it leads to hypertension. That is why the hypertensive patients are supposed to take less of sodium, less of salt, which is nothing but the sodium chloride component. Then it facilitates thermogenesis. Thermogenesis means heat production inside the body. So whenever you are anxious or you are stressed or you are responding to an emergency situation, you may find the face getting red and hot. The whole body is a little bit warmer than what it used to be when you are in a normal condition. So thermogenesis is also facilitated. Moreover, it leads to cutaneous vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction means constriction of blood vessels. We have blood vessels all over our body. They are just below the skin. They are deep beneath the skin. They are present in the vicinity of every single cell of our body. That is why the exchange of glucose and oxygen is possible. So, here we are talking about the blood vessels which are present just below the skin. The capillaries, the veins that you can see from above if you observe your skin carefully. Okay. So, these blood vessels get constricted, reducing the blood supply to the skin and just below it and taking the most of the blood towards the muscles. The level of awareness is also increased, means now more blood is available for consumptions of neurons. Neurons which are found in our brain and spinal cord and which coordinates the flow of information from the brain to body and from the sense organs to the brain. Unless this communication system works nicely, we will not be able to respond to the situation effectively. Just think what will happen if a stressor is there and we are able to perceive it after just a few milliseconds. This few milliseconds delay may cause a disaster for us. That is why increasing awareness and preparing neurons for a quick response is very essential. And finally, it has also found to suppress the reproductive activities of organisms. See how many effects are there if the sympathetic nervous system is activated. However, we also have a branch of autonomic nervous system which is known as parasympathetic nervous system, which is capable of countering the effects produced by sympathetic nervous system. So after a while, the parasympathetic nervous system starts getting activated and it gradually counters the effects produced by the SAM route. That is why this route is short acting but very intense in its effect. And this route is very useful whenever we come across to acute stressors which are sudden in nature, which are intense and are going to stay for a short period of time with us. Moving on to the next route. This is a slow route. Slow route because it takes more time to get activated, but it can work for a prolonged period of time. There is no established mechanism which automatically gets activated to counter its effect, just like the parasympathetic nervous system that we have in case of SAM route. So what happens here? Let's see. 3 important organs of the body are involved here: the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland. If you know something about endocrinology, that means the study of the endocrine glands present in our body, you must be knowing that hypothalamus is the part of the brain which regulates and supervises the activities of this endocrine system with the help of pituitary gland, which is also known as the master gland. So what happens? That hypothalamus releases certain releasing factors which triggers anterior pituitary. It also releases certain hormones in the blood which are specific to the glands that we have, and in response to those secretions, individual glands start activating and releasing their own hormones into the blood. So here we are considering only the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, one gland which we are taking into consideration. But this time we will be including adrenal cortex instead of adrenal medulla. If you remember, in SAM, adrenal medulla responds by releasing catecholamines, but this time adrenal cortex will respond. So if you look at the right side of your slide, you will find that hypothalamus is releasing CRH, that is corticotropin releasing hormone. This is going to trigger anterior pituitary to release adenocorticotropic hormone. This ACTH will again trigger the adrenal cortex, and this will release cortisols, glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids into the bloodstream. What happens when these cortisols are released? First of all, you should know that cortisols are known as stress hormones. Means whenever a person feels stressed, cortisols are released into the bloodstream. This cortisol release happens in response to long-term stress. It is not the case that we get stressed because of something for 2 hours and cortisols are released into the blood. Yes, a little bit of it will happen, but this is not going to extend for a long period of time. But whenever the stressor is prolonged and we are faced with the state of chronic stress, HPA axis gets activated and it responds to the situation. So we were talking about what happens if the cortisols are released. The immediate action could be the release of catecholamines from adrenal medulla, which is the adjacent part of the adrenal cortex. If the catecholamine is released into the blood, everything that we found in the earlier slide when we were talking about the effects of SAM will continue to happen. That means shortness of breath, increased heart rate, vasoconstriction, disturbances of GI tract, everything. In addition to that, it also leads to insulin suppression, again increasing the risk of diabetes. That is why it is said that diabetes is not a sole outcome of your genes, but a product of your genes and your lifestyle. So if you are leading a stressful life, you are inviting diabetes and many more complications for you. Next is suppression of immune system. You know what immune system is? Yes, it is the system of the body which encounters the foreign elements if they enter into our body and try to cause some harm to us, like bacteria, virus, fungi, anything, any kind of infection. If it happens, the T cells and mast cells and white blood corpuscles present in our blood, they try to fight with those foreign elements and kill them so that they cannot cause any harm to our body. But if cortisols are released in the blood, it is going to suppress the immune system. right? And finally, it mobilizes a great amount of energy into the blood. How it will be done? Again, by converting the stored glycogen and glucagon into glucose and bringing it back to the bloodstream so that that glucose is available for the cells for oxidation and metabolism. Now, the second line is the effect of this first line events. So, if the catechol is released, the risk of hypertension increases, and risk of hypertension is accompanied by the risk of myocardial damage. Myocardial damage means heart problems. In common language, myocardial damage means heart problems. Insulin suppression will definitely lead to hyperglycemia, which again increases multiple complications in our body, right? You must have heard that diabetes is a package of diseases, so it affects all organs of our body. Suppression of immune system makes us more vulnerable to infections, and mobilization of energy will cause exhaustion to the body. If you utilize all the stored resources of your body and put them in action, what will happen? You will soon find yourself in an exhausted state, and this is what happens exactly. That is why people who be stressed for a long time usually find themselves as fatigued and lacking energy to perform their routine tasks. So these were the mechanisms through which our body responds to stressor. Okay, but now we will come back to the actual topic of this module, that is various types of stressors. So what may be the potential stressors of physiological category? There are different types of stressors. In the next lecture, we will be talking about how many types of stressors can be there, and then we will deal with them one by one in consequent lectures. But here, because we have been dealing with the physiological part, I will talk about the physiological stressors that we can confront. The first and foremost of them are the viral and bacterial infections. This category is very important because of its diversity, the great diversity it has, and also due to the possibility of creating new type of infections. Who can forget the COVID-19, which happened due to a gene mutation of the virus causing common cold and cough. Common cold and cough or viral infection is a regular experience we go through, but because of a mutated gene, the virus became so powerful. So bacteria also has the same property. There are a number of infections that can be caused by viruses and bacteria, and they are all potential physiological stresses. So if they get into our body and our body is not able to deal with them, they can make us sick, creating a lot of stress. Then chronic illness conditions, especially those which are uncurable, like diabetes, hypertension, asthma, arthritis, eczema, ulcers, and the list goes on and on. All these illness conditions are not curable. We do not have any curative medicine, rather what we have are palliatives. Palliatives means to manage the condition so that it should not cause any further damage to the body. But definitely, if you consume palliatives, it will not reset your body to its earlier disease-free condition. Most of such diseases are metabolic disturbances like hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, hyperglycemia, hypertension. All these things are a result of metabolic disturbances of the body. Even obesity is one of them. Very difficult to get rid of the same. On the other hand, there are diseases like cancer, AIDS, HIV, which may happen due to some sort of infection or uncontrolled cell division, but are difficult to be cured, if at all. So such chronic illnesses, if happens, puts a lot of strain to the organism and make him feel sick as well as stressed due to the fact that these diseases are going to stay with me for a lifetime, or they may unfortunately take away my life also. Coming next is injury or trauma. Any sort of injury, including automobile accidents or accidents which happen in our home. For example, if we slip and fall down and there is some sort of injury or fracture in our body, everything is included in this category. So, injury and trauma are also potential physiological stressors. Next is pain. If there is pain in my body in any part of it, maybe I can have a toothache, or maybe there is some pain in my ear, or I am suffering from headache or stomach ache, whatever. The whole attention is focused on those parts only, and we literally cannot focus on anything else, no matter how important that is. We do not enjoy any activity we do, right? So pain is also a factor causing a lot of stress in organisms. Apart from these, nutritional deficiencies can also lead to different kind of diseases. For example, iodine deficiency may lead to hypothyroidism. Deficiency of calcium and vitamin D can lead to fragile bones which can easily be broken. Okay. Then sleep deprivation is also a potential cause of stress, and the prevalence of insomnia, both initial, middle and terminal, is increasing day by day. Insomnia causes a lot of stress because it does not leave the organism in a state to work or focus on anything. Whole day the person feels irritated and sleepy and suffering from lack of energy, thereby triggering a lot of stressful responses in his immediate environment. Then, intense exercise nowadays is becoming a potential threat for people. You might have read or heard news of people collapsing due to myocardial infarction suddenly doing workout, or those who were considered to be very fit, who used to spend hours in gym doing cardio exercises, they simply slipped into unconsciousness and then die, and even the time was not there to take him to hospitals. A number of cases we have heard about all these incidences. So, it means very intense exercise is also a potential threat to the body. It is better that you exercise regularly, but only to the extent that your body can bear with it. And finally, toxins and radiation. Any kind of toxic substance, if available in your environment and unfortunately inhaled or engulfed by you, can make you sick, and that diseased state will cause a lot of stress to you. So these were the stressors which operates through the physiological mechanisms, make us sick in one way or the other, and affect the state of the body, making us stressed. This stress is again reflected through bodily mechanisms with the release of cortisols and catecholamines, which are having multiple effects on the organs, right from the eyes to the genitals. So there is a generalized impact of stress on our body through these two routes, the sympathetic nervous system adrenal medulla axis and the hypothalamus pituitary and adrenal axis. That's all for today. These are the references that you can refer for further studies. Thank you so much for your kind attention.